This episode of Earl Grey is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org.
Hi, this is Jennifer Gotti. I played Bael on Star Trek Next Generation, and you're listening to Earl Grey on Trek FM.
T. Earl Grey host.
Welcome, listeners, to another cup of Earl Grey, Trek FM's dedicated podcast to the next generation. I'm your host, Amy Nelson. Now, Richard is away this week, but I do have, as he is all the time, Justin Ozer. Justin, how are you today?
I'm doing great. You know, it was, I guess, 2 episodes ago now that we were at Star Trek Las Vegas talking about the big Picard series news, and it's only a little over a week later, actually, as we're recording this, but great to be recording an Earl Grey in the era where we know there's a Picard series. That's not what we'll be talking about today, but it's great to know that.
I know, isn't it? It's just still the feeling carries with you. It's so exciting. I love seeing everyone's excitement for it and very excited.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, Richard's away and we don't have a guest this week. I think this is the first time that it's just you and me since, I think there was one sometime last year that was like that.
I was thinking the same thing because we usually like to, have 3 voices on Earl Grey. So this is something special.
Yeah, because Richard had an urgent last-minute mission.
Yes. Well, let's start off. We have a lot of Babel Conference feedback. So let's start off with Earl Grey 238, and that's where we talked about Romulans in The Enemy and The Defector.
Yeah, and that was the episode where we had John Krikorian from the Trek Profiles as a guest. So Tim Hand says, I remember reading that the TNG episode Face of the Enemy hoped to bring back the Romulan commander from the TOS episode The Enterprise Incident, but the actress was unfortunately unavailable, so the character of Toreth was created instead. Really was a missed opportunity there. Thanks, Tim. I think I had read that at some point, and as listeners might know if they listened to me talking about it on the Trek Profiles podcast, and maybe we mentioned on that Earl Grey episode as well, the Romulan commander from The Enterprise Incident is basically my favorite guest character in all of Star Trek. So if she would have been able to come back into that role in Face of the Enemy, that would have been awesome. Still, yes. Carolyn Seymour was awesome as Toreth, but that would have been really something to see if you had that continuity there.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Matthew Benware says, listening tomorrow, Earl Grey is my new favorite podcast. Well, Matthew, welcome, and we're so glad that you are enjoying, and just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Always great to hear not only that people like Earl Grey, but if it's their favorite, it doesn't have to be for you to listen, but when listeners comment that, it makes us feel a lot of love, so thank you.
It does.
Stefan Ringline says, Jolan True, I really enjoyed this episode. I remember watching those 2 episodes in first run as a kid and being absolutely fascinated. I love the Romulans and everything about them. The uniforms? Yes, I like them better than the TOS uniforms. The awesome D'Deridex warbird, the V on their forehead, which I missed in Star Trek 2009. TNG Romulans are the first ones I saw, so they are my favorites till today. I also would have liked to have seen more of them. Great discussion, guys. Well, thanks, Stefan. And I think we made fun of some of the fashion choices for the Romulans in TNG, but it's great that you love that and everything about it. I do love the Romulans in TNG and in TOS, but it's great that that's where you were introduced and what you knew about them first. So thanks for that comment.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you see them first. It just sticks in your head, and that's the one you go to. So
I think so, although I think the first time, let me think about this, that I saw the Romulans, it might have been... Well, actually, maybe it was Star Trek 2009, which is a very different version. But I love the ones in TOS and TNG both.
Well, we have some feedback from our discussion on the Picard announcement, and that's Earl Grey 239. If you haven't listened to it, please go back. We encourage you to. It's very exciting.
That's an understatement, Amy. We got a lot of feedback. I think since I've been on Earl Grey the last year, that's been the most comments I've ever seen. It felt almost like a postcards episode, didn't it? Because we're getting all the feedback, the hundreds of comments. So, of course, we can't read all of them, but we'll read a few here. There were varying opinions, but we just, kind of picked out a few here. AJ Black says, such fantastic news. Stewart never really got the chance to properly see Picard off, so if this gives us a fitting end to the character, we don't want another Kirk in Generations, let's face it, then it will be worth it. Plus, post-Nemesis, we've only been waiting for that for 15 years. I cannot wait. Yeah, we're excited as well, and, I have to say, with all the the stuff that you got in the Kelvin movies and with Discovery, I was wondering if we would only ever get 23rd century stuff, so I think, as I said, it's great to have something post-Nemesis so we can kind of move things forward and see what that's like as well. Yeah, that has been a very common theme going out. That's finally we're going, beyond Nemesis, beyond Voyager. So, but I like that we'll have kind of both at the same time. We'll have Discovery in the 23rd century and then the Picard series in the 24th century, which is something, I guess you had that when TNG was on and there were a couple of original series movies. You had kind of those going on in different centuries at the same time. So it'll be great to see that again. Yeah. Tim Han says, 2 moving things I took away from this group discussion episode. 1, Brandon Shea Mutella's emotional breakdown over hearing the news. Let the tears and emotions flow, brother. We are all with you. And Haley Stoddard's story and confession over her difficult upbringing when she was younger. We hear you, sister. We all feel and sympathize with you. Yet what brings us all together is how the power of Star Trek can unite us all together to solve what others would decide is unsolvable. Very well said. Yeah, that was, it was very emotional sitting there, with all of us hosts and, just getting that raw reaction. It was very powerful. It was. And being there, in the room and seeing the emotion that it was bringing out was really something. So, yeah, thank you, Tim. And thank you again, Brandon Shea Mutella and Haley Stoddard for sharing what you did on that episode. We really appreciate it. So Stefan Ringline says, wow, just finished listening. Thank you guys for giving us an idea of what it was like to hear the big news firsthand and live. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and emotions. When Brandon was talking, I was almost to tears as well. It's a special moment in Star Trek history, and having this podcast with all you great hosts was the icing on the cake for me. Over here in Germany, people are excited as well. To the future, engage. So thank you. And it's great to know of how people are feeling about it elsewhere, like in Germany, where I know there's a lot of big Star Trek fans. So thank you for that. And Dan Hadley says, this will be my very first listen to Earl Grey. Feeling the Picard love and last few days has really stoked me up, and it's great. Trek FM is right on this already. So again, welcome. Love to have new listeners, and it was very exciting to record that and get that out as soon as we could. Yeah, welcome. Thank you for listening. Hope you stay with us because not every episode is about big news. But yes, that's always wonderful to hear that it's someone's first time listening to Earl Grey. So welcome, and hope you also listen to our other podcasts on Trek FM. And finally, we had some great feedback on characters who play musical instruments. That is Earl Grey 240. This was just such a fun episode. So, Justin, why don't you start us off? It was a lot of fun. So first we have Jerry Gilbert Paduano, who says, I see Data playing Devil Went Down to Georgia with Charlie Daniels. You know you love it. Well, yes, I think we do. I hadn't thought about that, but it's a great, great choice. I just might have to rescind. Although I love Dixie Chicks, but this is great. Yeah. You don't want to see like Data dressed up as a woman in the Dixie Chicks anymore? Well, I do, but now I want to see them both. All right. Maybe they'll have a concert together. Yes. Now, Wes Hennington says, you mentioned Jethro Tull in regards to Picard's flute. My ears went up because I have been a Jethro Tull fan all my life, thanks to my dad.
Living in the Past would be the best song Picard could rock out with his flute. He could also rock out to the song Locomotive Breath too. By the way, Picard did also play the flute, albeit briefly, in the opening scenes of A Fistful of Datas.
Yeah, thank you, Wes. Glad you enjoyed us talking about that. I had totally forgotten that it's in A Fistful of Datas where Picard, I think he's playing flute, but he keeps getting interrupted. I'll have to rewatch that.
Yeah, over and over again.
Well, Greg Malumbi says, Amy, you're a Dixie Chicks fan? Cool, so am I. Also, Justin's little joke predicting news from the convention was very prophetic. Great discussion on the various instruments used in the series. Well, thank you, Greg. And, well, I'll just comment on the part where you mentioned me. You know, when we recorded that, I thought, you know, I'd say something, we'd have some earth-shattering news, and of course we wouldn't, right? That doesn't happen at conventions, but it did. Oh, my God.
It did. I know. When Greg posted that, I was like, oh, my gosh, I totally forgot that you made that prediction because we recorded that, you know, obviously before
like
STLV.
A week before.
And there's never any news for us. It always happens at SDCC. So it was awesome.
Let's hope also that's the norm, that when they have big news, they bring it to Star Trek conventions. I would love that. And I think that would get even more people to go to the conventions.
Exactly.
Yeah. And glad you enjoyed the discussion and that you're a fan of the Dixie Chicks like Amy is. That made you happy to see that, right?
It did. It did. Matthew Benware says, great episode. I didn't originally think I would enjoy this topic, but as usual, you all made it so interesting. Well done.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. And thanks for putting faith in us. You probably saw the description. You were like, that's not it, but I'll listen anyway. So I'm glad that you did and that you enjoyed it. We try to make it interesting no matter the topic.
We do. Well, let's get on to today's discussion. I'm very excited. I think Justin did some great work, and we do have to give props to our Standard Orbit team. They, on their episode 168, that was back April last year, and they talked about TOS, the original series, Creatures and Monsters. And so we are going to follow their lead and talk about some TNG-inspired creatures and monsters.
I can't believe it's been on our list for this long, because I think I think they did it before I even joined Earl Grey, but it was always like, you should do Creatures of TNG. Well, now we're going to do that. And I'll just start by saying, you know, I picked out a certain number, but there were a lot more. I probably had a list that was 2 or 3 times as long, but we have only so much time, so we'll see what we can cover here, and you can also put in the ones that you think about when you think of creatures in TNG.
Yeah. Listeners, let us know if we hit any of yours or which ones are your favorite or some that we had missed, because there's obviously the list is long.
Although I guess it depends on how you define a creature. Like, what do you see as a creature in Star Trek? Yeah.
So starting with this first one, you put down Gah.
Yes.
And I was like, is that really a creature? It seems it's more food, right?
Yeah, but it kind of writhes around, and it's alive when Klingons are eating it. It's we don't communicate with it, we don't talk to it or anything like that. But if you think of a creature, you could have a broad definition. It could be anything that's maybe non-humanoid, but maybe it's humanoid and seems more animal or creature-like. I don't know. But for some reason, like when I was doing my research, that's the first thing that came up, because, it is just food, but we do sometimes see it writhing around, and they're worms. So they're creatures, But I don't know why that first came up for me.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, well, okay. So I guess if you're vegan, then you wouldn't be eating Gah.
No. I don't know if listeners know, but I am vegan, so I would not eat the Gah. Maybe there'd be a vegetarian substitute. I don't think it would still writhe around, but yeah, no. It was first introduced in the TNG episode A Matter of Honor. I don't know if you actually really see it a lot, but you hear it referred to a lot, and there's even a Deep Space Nine episode where Ezri Dax is talking about all of the various different kinds of disgusting gawk that's out there, but I don't know why. But this was the first one on the list. I don't know if there's a lot to say about it, except, what do you think? Do you see it and you're like, ooh, or do you see it and you're like, I'd like to eat that?
Yeah, I don't. I like sushi, so eating things raw.
But this is alive at its
but
best.
This is alive, so that's it sort of crosses the line there.
Okay.
Maybe Well, because they mention like, some people it's dead, when they eat it and they're like, oh, it's not alive. It's
Right.
better. But yeah, I don't know if I could do it. But Riker, man, in Matter
With
of Honor,
relish.
he just digs right in.
To all the Klingon food. And I think
Yeah.
this may be the only one on the list that is routinely seen as food, I think. I think it's safe
Yeah.
to say. But anyway, for whatever reason, that just came up first when I was doing my research.
Well, and I guess we won't mention Saru's or the threat ganglia.
Well,
Wrong series.
yeah, I don't want to spoil things for people, but I don't think that's a part of of a sentient being, not a creature, really. But I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're not talking about disgusting food. Let's get on this one again from our Klingon culture, the Targ. And we know that Worf had a Targ growing up.
I think so. I mean, it appears in this episode where no one has gone before, where people are kind of imagining things. So it's like he's imagining this creature. I think it was they brought in like a wild boar or something to play the Targ. So it has these tusks and this weird fur, and it's basically like a boar. But it's possible that you see it also in Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 6, though they don't call them Targs. But I mean, they're kind of like Klingon dogs, would you say?
Yeah. With horns. And
interesting fur. And I don't know, maybe it's something we could see more of. Would you like to see more Targs?
I would. I mean, it's sort of nice knowing that Klingons have pets like we do. It makes them a little more endearing. And it's like, oh, okay, they have homes and, stuff like that. Because we just always see them in this warrior mentality.
Yeah.
So I liked the addition that expanded their culture.
I mean, actually, you just see it a little bit. But if it is a Targ that you're seeing in like Star Trek 3 by Krug side, it looks pretty vicious. Looks like they can be kind of vicious. So
yeah, looks like something that might take a while to get trained.
And as I was thinking about it, I mean, you see other pets, like you see Picard's fish, Livingston in his ready room. You see that Data has a cat Spot, but they're just what you would usually see, on Earth, let's say. But I'm trying to think if we see any other pets besides Targs that are kind of
Vulcan
exotic.
pet?
No, we do actually. But that's not on here because it wasn't in TNG. But you do see in the animated series the Salot, which is kind of like a Vulcan cat almost, I guess.
Yeah.
And you see there are references elsewhere, but I don't think you don't see one in TNG. But yeah, there's the Salot. Maybe that's the only other one. Yeah.
Yay.
There is another one.
I've seen that.
Yeah. Well, you've seen that far into the animated series, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I have.
yesteryear. But it is unusual that we see exotic pets like that. Maybe we'll see more. Maybe Picard, 20 years after Nemesis, has some kind of exotic pet.
Yeah.
Who knows what he's doing
in
by
his
then.
travels. And
Oh my God, we could keep
if he's
speculating.
An ambassador.
Yeah,
I know.
We need to know what he's doing first. But yeah.
Okay, so this one very excited to talk about because this one freaks me out. It's the parasite from Conspiracy.
Yes.
So what did you think about this creature? I mean, it's small.
I mean, in fact, I think the last time it was just the two of us, we talked about Conspiracy. Was that right? I think so. Yeah, it's really creepy. I mean, when you take a look at it and it's in this case that this admiral has, I mean, it kind of looks like, I don't know, it's some kind of like vicious beetle or something. I don't know. How would you describe it? Yeah.
To me, it's sort of a cross between like a beetle and a scorpion.
Yeah, I could see that.
Just sort of like the pincers, although it just has the one, but it sort of, crawls like a scorpion, and it's got this, to me, this hard exterior shell like a beetle. But it is freaky. It can move fast and it does some serious damage.
And I think it's the first one on this list that can be very dangerous because, of course, it can take you over and make you do other things and like make you increase your strength and make you really formidable. And yeah, they always creep me out. I mean, that's definitely like a horror movie kind of creature that you see in Conspiracy, right?
Yeah, and the build-up through the episode, like, we only see one, and then we see two, and then at the end, there's like this mother, and there's a whole bunch of them all crawling. That's just classic horror movie, freaky. It just freaks
Quite
me out.
possibly the freakiest creature in the Next Generation. Well, we'll see from this list, but
We'll see.
Yeah, every time I see it, I just think, we wouldn't want to encounter that one. Whereas a Targ, it's like, oh, that's a nice pet. And with the
Yeah.
Gok, it's like, oh, it's just squirming around on the plate. It's not going to like jump off the plate and kill you, right?
Exactly.
As far as we know.
Yeah.
But-
I see that parasite and it's just like, ooh, and you have to shiver, makes my skin crawl, and I get the heebie-jeebies.
It definitely does. And for this parasite, we only see it in that episode. Now, Zach Moore, take a shot. I'm going to say in the novels, you get to see the parasites again. There's a DS9 novel called Unity where you see them, which I probably mentioned before. But yeah, you never really see them again on screen and don't know what happened. Who knows? Maybe in the I'm going to keep doing this. Maybe in the Picard series, it's the parasites come back and Picard has to fight them again. Who knows? But yeah, they're real. I mean, and they make a huge impact for just being in that one episode, I think.
Well, and where did they even get these parasites? Because it was through their travels, that one of them was infected and then...
They're very vague in the episode, but they build up this whole backstory for them in the novels. So,
Okay.
yeah. I don't want to spoil
All
it.
right.
But in the episode, that's also like, where do they come from? Are there more of them? How far away are they? Because at the end, Remick, who's been taken over by this queen parasite, sends a message and they don't know where or what's going on. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Definitely a creature to steer clear of if you can.
Yes. Now, at Encounter at Farpoint, we get these lovely space jellyfish. They are so beautiful, and what powers they have, right?
Yes, because they can mimic a station and they have other powers, and you don't really know where that comes from or why they're like that. But, starting out right away, and as you can see, we're not going in chronological order of the episodes. It was just whatever came up. But you see these space jellyfish, and they're these spaceborne organisms that pretty much, I guess their whole lives are supposed to be in space, but they're mimicking this Farpoint station. They seem really powerful. They seem huge. I mean, they really dwarf the Enterprise. I mean, they're these giant, like kilometers long creatures. And we don't really get to know too much about them, but they seem, pretty fascinating, right?
Yeah. Well, and they're telepathic because, like, whatever you think, whatever you wish, whatever your desire is, then they produce. It's like, oh, there's these apples. I really wanted oranges. Oh, here's an orange. Oh, let's look at this beautiful material. I wish they had this in metallic. Ta-da! Here it is, So very powerful. And there was no intent to do harm. But yet, so right. I think it's interesting that humans, or whatever they were at Farpoint, they were a different...
It was a different species. I'd have to look up what the name of them was. But Groppler Zorn was one of them, right?
Yes. They're going to capture it and use it for their benefit, and with no consideration to this obviously intelligent life, and a commentary in and of itself right there.
Yeah, and it's quite different. The one we just talked about, Conspiracy, it was like, oh my God, they're trying to take over our whole society. We need to get rid of them. And here they're kind of being enslaved.
Yes.
So, yeah, I looked it up, and they're the Bandi that are on that planet.
Yes, the Bandi.
Now,
that's right.
There's also a novel connection for this one.
Oh.
For one that I recently read. It's a Titan novel called Orion's Hounds. It's really, really excellent. And this is the one I told you, Amy, where Deanna Troi is basically the star of it. But they also bring back the space jellyfish. They call them star jellies in the novel. And there's actually this area of space they come from where there's this whole like group of different diverse like spaceborne species. He actually creates this really interesting world, and it's a great, great novel. So, but on screen we don't see much, but he builds up like this whole thing about the star jellies and all these other organisms he calls cosmozoans that basically live their lives completely in space, which is a really great concept. Just thinking like, oh, you don't need a planet. And they just kind of feed off of energy from stars and other things. And it's a really great novel. It builds up like a whole universe for that. But I've always been fascinated by them since the first time I saw Encounter at Farpoint, and I wanted to know more about them.
Yeah. Well, and I love their love connection that they have, that they are mates, and so again, that just...
Yeah, they touch tentacles. It seems
me.
kind of intimate. Yes. But yeah.
It is.
But no, they do seem like they're... I mean, I guess yeah, they must be a sentient species. I mean, it seems like they're
Yes.
a really fascinating sentient species, and we're calling them creature here, I think, because they're just so different. They live in space. They're not humanoid. They're very different, but they're really great. And I do kind of love that they're at the center of that whole mystery in the episode.
Yeah. And I like, again, like you said, like we don't really see a lot of space living creatures.
There's a few
sort of
more on the
reminds
list,
me-
though.
Yeah.
But we don't see.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, there's
That's
a couple
true.
more later in the list. But as far as Spaceborne, I mean, there's probably a handful of episodes that talk about that in The Next Generation, and maybe a few more elsewhere in Star Trek. It's not a common thing because usually you want your away team or landing party to go to a planet and to find a species that lives on a
And
planet
land somewhere.
and yeah, that kind of stuff. So it's a nice treat when you see Spaceborne species like this.
Yeah. Well, and like Discovery had the tardigrade, you know.
That is true. Although the tardigrade can live on Discovery, apparently.
Yeah.
Whereas the space jellyfish, it's too big to live on any ship. So
Yeah, but it's living on a planet as well.
that's true. It does do
Yeah.
that as well. Oh, you're right. You're right. The tardigrade is one of those. You are absolutely right.
All right. Well, another space living creature we get in Galaxy Child, the spaceborne species.
I don't think that I was
right?
trying to look it up. It doesn't really have a name. It is just a spaceborne species from Galaxy's Child, where they encounter this organism that's living in space. The way they designed it, I think it's almost like a ravioli with a tail. That's what it seems like. Not to demean it, but because it has like these indentations in it and like this circular part, and then it
my
has a tail
gosh.
at the back.
Now I'm going to see that every time I watch this episode.
But they're too big to eat. Don't try to eat them. But yeah, so they encounter this organism and they find that, they're trying to ward it off, but end up killing it, and they find it's a mother and they have to help it give birth to a child. And then, they end up finding all of these different members of that species in an asteroid belt, and they're trying to glom onto the energy on the hull. I mean, they're a lot of the focus of the episode. And, unlike the space jellyfish from Encounter at Farpoint, you see, it looks like there's just dozens and dozens of them living together, and they have this whole community. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, because they feed off the neutrino, right?
Some part of the
see-
energy. I don't remember what
Yeah.
what it was, but there's something that they were feeding off of that they congregated in a certain place, but I forget because I haven't seen the episode in a while.
I'm pretty sure it was the neutrino, because they
it?
send
Yeah.
out this neutrino beam so that they could follow and
Okay.
go in their little asteroid area that was high in neutrinos.
And so, yeah, they just live out there in space among asteroids, and they're really the focus of the episode. And, a very different design than the space jellyfish. Sorry,
Yeah.
ravioli with the tail. That sounds weird now, but but that's kind of what they make me think of. And they're very interesting creatures. Again, just like living out in the vacuum of space. Will we find something like that out there? That would be really interesting. If we found maybe more of that even than species on planets, who knows?
Yeah, right. Well, and I like this one again because there's this idea of a family unit, that this creature brings that, out there in space, there's these groups and living in their communities.
Yeah, and when the mother creature dies, but the child inside is still alive, they have to kind of do like a C-section with their
C-section.
phaser. It's like surgery in space, which is a really interesting idea that I don't know if you really even see much elsewhere, but
Right?
yeah, it's just, so I think what we're finding so far is what's great about these different creatures that are just so different from, the humanoid species that we're used to, is that there's a lot of like different storytelling potential and thinking about different societies and different ways of thinking of things. It feels a lot more exotic and alien, I think, than if it's humanoid just living on a planet where you can breathe oxygen, right?
Yeah, very true. Yeah. And I like sort of the differing perspectives that you get from the crew on the Enterprise, because, some are like, well, we need to kill it because it's draining our energy. And well, we have a responsibility because the mother died. And, so it's a sentient life. Oh, it's just a space alien that's not sentient, and so that whole debate of, how are we going to react when we encounter new life, new creatures.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, how does Geordi react when the real Leia Brahms comes by?
Now, another fascinating creature, which I'm very excited to talk about, is Gumtu in Tin Man. Oh, man, describe this, Justin.
Well, like I included in our outline an image that I found. I mean, you see inside the creature as well, but on the outside, it's almost like, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it seems like it's some kind of like, not like a walnut, but some kind of like nut that has like this energy underneath it, but it's kind of like a little bit torpedo shaped. It's just another different kind of design for a spaceborne creature, and it can communicate telepathically with this betazoid that comes by, and you get to see inside of it. It's can have an atmosphere that people can breathe, and I think it even has like a chair you can sit in it can kind of mold and form itself. So
right,
that's another interesting idea. Well, actually, for the space jellyfish, they did go inside of that because there was this chamber where they were holding Zorn, but you don't really see inside of the spaceborne species in Galaxy's Child. But here you do, and it's like this kind of, it is a sentient life form, but it's like a bioship as well. There's a really interesting like idea here, and it's also very powerful because it can put out this energy wave that I think at one point knocks the Enterprise and a Romulan ship way out into space. So they're just gathering all of this energy, and it seems like they're all pretty powerful for being these spaceborne species.
Yeah, and I like that this one, sort of similar to us, where we need our star, we need our sun, and Gumtu, is looking for, because his star, collapsed, died, and
right.
so he's out looking, and so yeah, and I like with Gumtu that they're combining this idea of a ship with a sentient being.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
because we don't really see it, especially this early on. And I just think it's interesting that it can produce major energy. It can, travel. Does it go warp speed?
I think it can go warp speed.
Yeah. So it's like really weird to combine these two ideas because, everything previously, like the jellyfish, they're just, hanging out, and, in Galaxy's Child, they're just hanging out in the asteroid belt, whatever. But man, this Gumtu, he's going to travel.
Actually, I was just looking it up. Has warp drive and transporter capability, and can have like a shield. So it is like a ship, right?
Yeah, a sentient ship.
Mm-hmm. And somehow has this special connection with the Betazoid in the episode, whose name I wish I could remember now. Tam.
But it's the one that...
It's Tam Elbrun. Yeah.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And Troy knows him.
Right. Well, and this was the first episode of The Next Generation that Richard saw, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's one of his favorites because of that. So
it is.
If you're listening, Richard, we had this discussion for you. But yeah, it is and I think it's great that with these spaceborne species in The Next Generation, they don't all look the same. I think between the space jellyfish, the spaceborne species in Galaxy's Child, and Gomtu from Tin Man, they all look quite different. So I like that they were taking the time to design that like they would a different ship that's of a different species. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, they all, you're right. Every one, they just all look different and unique.
The three of these look a lot different than any three like Federation starships in the 24th century, probably because they have kind of similar. Well, maybe the Defiant's different, but I do like that they took a lot of time to just have an interesting design. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one creature that I guess we could qualify as a monster.
You could
is Armus,
probably, yeah.
From Skin of Evil.
Yeah.
Now, Armus, I think, is a very interesting idea. So he is the collection of all this negativity, hatred.
Mm-hmm. That some other beings left behind for him, right?
Right.
Yeah, which is really tragic to think about. But yeah, in the episode, he has all of this negativity and becomes kind of this embodiment of evil, and is just looking to kind of vent his rage through the episode and unfortunately kill Tasha.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Like, but as far as design, I mean, basically it looks like a person in a suit that's been covered in like black ink, which is kind of what happened. I think it ended up being like printer's ink and Metamucil that they like kind of mixed up together to make this. And so in that way, maybe more of looks like something from the original series. But I think it's an interesting design for Armus, because right away, you know, you it seems like really mysterious. You can't really kind of get to know him. I guess for the spaceborne species, there isn't like, you know, a head with eyes or something like that for the most part. But there's something like that feels a little bit more like, oh, I can deal with this. But with Armus, it just feels like it's like a giant oil slick, you know, and it's like, how can you reason with that?
Right. And well, the fact that he can, you know, go to this gelatinous, you know, oil slick, as you say, but then also appear as this.
Yeah, gather himself up into like a humanoid form. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, he's got to be, I don't know. I mean, that just seems, I don't think we've seen a creature like this before that can take on different shapes that we don't even know what it is. I mean, it's not a person.
Well, I mean, maybe we've seen something a little bit like that with some of the shape-shifting entities that you might see in the original series, like even going back to the Salt Vampire and the Man Trap, where it's like can kind of imitate different people, but not quite like this. Not quite like this, where it's like, I'm not going to, you know, imitate someone to try to do something. I'm just going to be my own thing. And I'm going to have this, it's like he has this form where he's just kind of spread out as a liquid, but that can then gather himself into something solid. And as that liquid can pull Riker in and all this stuff, which is...
and so it's got to be deep, but yet like when you see him move, it just looks like he's on ground, but then he pulls these people in, and it's like, well, you know, if you've heard Jonathan Frakes talk about it, like there was this elevator, you know, that lifts them up and down. And it's just, that scene where Riker and his mouth is open and he gets swallowed in like that.
That must have been really something just to shoot that, because that's no fun. I mean, whether it was it actually Jonathan Frakes doing some of that where he's like covered in it, or was it like a stand-in? I don't know. I think it might have been Jonathan Frakes, but
I mean, he talks about it like he was there. He was the one doing it. Oh.
So I'm just kind of curious, because this is, you know, another one that's really dangerous. Would you rather face Armus or the parasites from Conspiracy?
Oh man, sakes alive.
I mean, it's a little tough, because with Armus, you know, with one gesture, you can just strike someone down and kill them. And with the parasites, it's not going to be a quick death, or they're going to take you over, and then maybe, I don't know if the parasites themselves are really killing people, but they're kind of taking them. They're using you, but then you may die because you're doing something that someone has to shoot you for. So
so then you know that your body is being used that's in a way that you don't want it to, you know, and here you would just die.
Yeah, they're both pretty dangerous. Unfortunately, Armus is the most dangerous to someone that's leaving the show, because he wasn't going to like strike down Picard or Riker, but yeah.
Yeah, I think he's the most, I think he's more complex, because I'm still unclear as like, what is he? Like the little beetle scorpions, you know, like that's a shape, that's who they are. This, I don't even know. How does he get his powers? Why is he telepathic? What, you know, and there's no reasoning. Like with the parasites, you could be like, well, don't take over this world because we're not worth it. And, you know, maybe
but at the same time, you don't know what the ultimate goal is of the parasites. It's like, okay, they're looking to take over the Federation, but then what? You don't quite know. Whereas with Armus, it's like, I have all this hatred and rage and I just want to strike out. Like, that's pretty much all there is to it. He doesn't have any grand plan or design, but he's dangerous because like he could just strike you down. I don't know. I think they're both quite dangerous, and I think this qualifies more of a monster. Although, like, what's the difference really between a creature and a monster? A monster is just like a creature that has An
Ill
evil
intent?
intent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and this looks like a monster.
Right. It really does. I mean,
Yeah.
it could actually have been like a monster from like a 50s horror movie or something, right?
Exactly.
Has that feel to it.
All right. So this one's interesting because, again, this one doesn't really take any shape that we know of. Is it living in space? We don't know. This is from Home Soil, the microbrain life form. Ugly bags of mostly water.
It is that one that calls them ugly bags of mostly water. I mean, you see it's kind of like this point of light, and then I think at the end of the episode it ends up, kind of making itself into this certain shape. But it's kind of like the space jellyfish, because it had this habitat on this planet, like under the soil, and it was being disturbed by what was going on with this terraforming project, and is kind of, because of that, is kind of trying to defend itself and its species and lashing out. So you can really feel for it a lot, right? Although they're so tiny that it's hard to, it was actually even hard to get like a good image, because it's like, okay, it's a point of light, right? And then I think toward the end, it just ends up becoming this, turning into this shape and going somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, what do you think of, am I stretching the definition by calling it a creature?
Yeah, maybe a little an entity, but it sort of fits. What, do you think it's a creature?
I mean, I put it on the list because I was thinking of creature as something that you can interact with that's not humanoid and that's exotic, like something you wouldn't find on Earth. Like, it's not Data's cat, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's something I would, even though you could call that a creature, it's something that's more exotic or different than, seeing like a Vulcan or a Klingon or something like that, that for the most part is kind of like a human, but with some different features and attitudes, right? But this is something that's pretty alien. That's the way I'm thinking of it.
Yeah. Then absolutely agreed, because, this one, different from Encounter at Farpoint, like this one, we're not trying to enslave it. I mean, I guess we are trying to destroy it.
Well, it's like they were accidentally doing it, but at a certain point they were I think the director of the project was kind of looking the other way, but it wasn't, I think, with the same kind of intent. Like, Zorn knows that the space jellyfish is sentient and he's basically enslaving it. And in this case, it's a bit more accidental. But I think it's an interesting idea that you could have something that's so small that can still communicate with you. Where you could use the universal. That's where I think, wow, the universal translator is amazing. Not only these humanoid creatures that are kind of speaking and have vocal cords, but there's this tiny point of light that you can communicate with. That's pretty impressive, right?
Yeah. And I'm sorry I'm being so negative, but it just, and then they figure out a way that, it needs light, and so we're going to starve it of its light.
Yeah, they're kind of torturing it at one point, aren't they?
I know.
That makes me uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah,
like,
that one.
If you thrive on light, let me dim the light switch. No, don't do that. Yeah. It's like, But that's like the negotiating tactic that Picard uses because they're endangering the ship. But yeah, it's an interesting one just to think about, like this little creature. I mean, it also makes you think, like, are there little creatures on Earth that might be sentient, but we don't have a universal translator, so we can't communicate with them? I don't know.
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. We need to get that universal translator going.
Well, they're working on it.
Yeah.
I mean, they do have pretty good real-time translation for some languages now, so I think we're getting there.
They do.
But that's just for the languages we know. The universal translator can really look at a language it's never seen before and analyze it and try to figure it out. That's something we can't do yet, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Now, this one I always get confused, but this one is the little nanites from Evolution.
Yep.
And I always get them confused with the exocomps, but they're not the same. I know, isn't that weird?
Exocomps are much bigger individually.
I know, and they go in and fix things.
And they have the little feet
sentient.
and they fly. And
I know, and they're little cute. But the nanites, this is the one from Wesley's experiment. Well, it is still Wesley's experiment.
It is from Wesley's experiment, yeah.
And they escape and they start causing havoc on the ship.
Yeah, and this is another one where they're these tiny organisms. I mean, they're like microscopic. and you can communicate with them with the universal translator, and they can inhabit data and talk through him. And wow, I mean, that's really, really something. I mean, it's kind of similar to the microbrain in that they're kind of accidentally doing harm because they kind of break out and start, I guess, reproducing. They end up having all these generations and like building up all this knowledge, and they don't really necessarily want to destroy the ship, but they need something like to feed off of. And so they end up giving them a planet, I think, or they're going to the nanite planet. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
What it would look like. Maybe Picard visits the nanite planet. No. But yeah, it's another one that's like a fascinating idea because it's a little different than this microbrain kind of life form, because like when they are showing it, it almost looks like a circuit in your computer that's just kind of moving around, but it's sentient and it's eating stuff, and it can be really dangerous, but it's accidental, right?
Yeah. So did Wesley create them, or did he find them?
I don't think he created them. I think it's something that was around, but he was doing some kind of experiment and they got out. It makes you wonder, like, why didn't this happen before where they got out and wreaked havoc? But I think it's implied that this is something that existed already. I mean, and also like in our own time, we're starting to have nanotechnology and machines, maybe a bit like nanites, that can even think about doing like microsurgery and stuff like that. I think a lot of it's experimental, but we're getting toward that point where you could see something like that. But I think I don't think it's something he created. He was just doing like a science experiment with a couple of them and they got out.
Yeah, so he had to have found them somehow.
Or created them. I mean, they're not really clear on what they really are.
I know, because I'm like, if he created them, then it's not really a creature because it's a man-made product gone wrong, you know? But
yeah.
If he found them and was researching them, then that, I guess, would fit into this. It is very unclear. It's just...
Yeah, I probably maybe stretched this one too far because I was reading more about it, and it is kind of like originally like a robotic device that, you know, gains sentience in the episode. But I was including it because it's quite exotic. I mean, I guess you could put the exocomps as well, although the exocomps seem more like a machine that you would usually see, right?
Yeah, and and plus that they were definitely created and then getting into AI, which we're not going
there.
Yeah,
apparently these were created for research, but they became sentient. Yeah, actually, like when I was thinking about creatures, I was like, what about the Enterprise computer in Emergence? Because it becomes this sentient being, really, but I thought that was too far. Maybe I'm stretching some of these too far.
Well, we'll save that for an AI discussion because, being created versus being discovered is different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so on to the Tarkanan 3 life form in Identity Crisis. And I love this episode. This is where Geordi goes down and this virus or something takes over in them, and they end up
turning into something else. I mean, this is the one where basically it looks like they have like a black bodysuit and there's like these blue veiny things and green eyes that they have. So I mean, apparently it's a way for this life form to kind of be able to continue and to reproduce. It will kind of infect you, I guess, and start turning you into what it wants to be on this planet. Mm-hmm. So, and I think I think you can, like at a certain point, they become pretty much invisible and you can just see them under ultraviolet light, which is pretty interesting. But it's also,
it is
like, it has to transform another being into what it wants to be. So that's a little bit different, right?
So more like a parasite.
Kind of.
Like, because it needs something else to continue to live. So it's going to get this.
Kind of. I mean, although a virus, needs something from you in order to continue to keep going and reproducing, but it doesn't transform you like this does, right?
Yeah.
Something different. But yeah, I think it's an interesting design and an interesting life form. And it seems like it's dangerous because it could transform you, and you might never be able to be reversed from that form.
Brought back, yeah.
Apparently, Geordi is okay to do that by that point, but it could be an irreversible change, and it's an interesting idea.
Yeah. And I like it. Have you heard LeVar Burton talk about this suit that he had to wear? A
little bit.
Yeah, you're right. It was just this green, for the green screen, and then these wires, and they would and
I think I mentioned at one point in a previous Earl Grey that Michael Westmore has said that out of everything that he did from 1987 to 2005 for makeup, this took the longest. Was this creature. It took like 6 hours or something like that. I think it was like 6 hours to put it on, a couple hours to take it off. It was just like an all-day thing. And I think LeVar Burton was like, let's just do all the shots we possibly need to do and make it one day, please.
Yes.
But yeah, it's and that's an interesting idea as well, that they become invisible and you can only see them under certain kinds of light. So... Mm-hmm.
Well, and I like this too because, again, going back to what I mentioned, like you see that there's this community of these creatures that they, are living together, but yet they sort of de-evolve, like they're more instinctual, but yet still live in communities is what I understand.
Yeah, I don't know if they were clear about it, but it's like they can't really communicate in the same way anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So something's been taken away, but I don't know if we really know much about how they work. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, this is, I don't know, creature or monster. I'll let you decide. We have from Schisms, you're going to have to say that name.
Solanogen-based life form. So they aren't given a name in the episode, but they're the ones that, I think when we talked about it before, some of the people who were working on the episode said they ended up coming up like fish monks because they have these hoods and they look kind of like a fish head or reptilian or something like that. But yeah, they're the species that's in, I think it's like another subspace domain, and they're kidnapping people from the Enterprise, like Riker and some others, in order to do some experiments. Apparently they don't talk about it much in the episode for what they're doing, but I think it's really frightening just to think you go to sleep and you get abducted, all kinds of experiments, and you can't remember. Riker's his arm gets amputated at one point during the night. That's ridiculously freaky.
Well, and that they're I like the intent is that they're trying to figure out a way, like, how can we live in your space? How can you live in our space? We need to figure this out. And they are scientists in essence. Now, what they want to do in our space, that's still up for debate. But, there's this group of scientists that are, performing these, little, well, not little, because, Riker's arm is amputated and put back on, and, blood is being taken out and put in with this other solanogen-based liquid.
I mean, I guess you could say they're kind of like a monster, although the way that they're designed, I think the people who are working on the episode were a little disappointed by it, that it didn't look frightening enough, but I thought just the idea of what they were doing was frightening. And as I think I mentioned on another episode, there is a novel, take another shot, Zach, that talks about them more, the Titan novel Sight Unseen, and they get a name for the species, the Solanae, and you actually get to learn about their society and why they're doing this. It's really fascinating. But yeah, I mean, they're definitely a very memorable creature. I mean, not only are they doing these things that are frightening and they look different, but they're from like this different domain. They never actually get into the Enterprise's like subspace domain or universe, but they're able to do all of these things that are really frightening. And I think a lot of people would say it's one of the scariest episodes in Star Trek. So that's, I wouldn't want to have to deal with them, because I think that's something that since I was a kid, I was actually afraid like I'd get abducted by aliens or that experiments would be done on me. I've gotten over that, but but it's one of those things that you're really afraid of something that's unknown like that you may not even know about. Yeah.
Well, and just the idea of being pulled out of bed, I mean, that just gives everyone nightmares.
Gosh. Slide you out of bed and take you through this thing. Ugh.
I know.
Yeah, and I'll give you bedhead all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have, I think, something that's very beautiful the crystalline entity, and we see this in Daedalus and Silicon Avatar. So it is. I think it's one of the more beautiful creatures, monsters.
It's dangerous. I mean, it kills people.
It's dangerous, but I don't know if it's ill intent. It's
trying to feed. It isn't like, oh, I'm going to go and kill these people. It's just looking for food and energy and organic molecules, I guess, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a really interesting kind of like, it's like this giant tree with kind of shimmering branches and like it looks like a clear Christmas tree or something. It's very interesting the way that it looks. And again, it's another spaceborne species. And this is one actually that also appears in that novel that I mentioned before, the Titan novel Orion's Hounds. That's kind of part of this group of different spacefaring organisms. So it's again a different design for a spaceborne species, and one that is kind of just trying to live its life in its way, but is negatively impacting our own, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, when I look at it, my math brain, it looks like a fractal, with the repeating patterns and stuff as it goes out. But
there was probably something related to fractals that they used in designing it, because that's used in a lot of computer design, right?
It is, yes. When I think about the crystalline entity, like it's scary, and it's like it brings this awe, and you have to respect it, but it's not something. I don't know, fear. I mean, you have to respect it, but it's not having this ill intent that it wants to kill you. It just wants to, live.
But if it is trying to kill you, whether there's ill intent or not, it's still something that can be frightening. And also, it's huge. Like one of these images, you showed the Enterprise, and it's like a fraction of the size of this thing. So it's absolutely enormous.
But it does communicate, because we know, it talks with Lore, and, Lore sends it a location for it to go. So
I mean, there is a way that he communicates with it, although when the Enterprise is trying to communicate with it in Silicon Avatar, it's not like they're really getting a lot of information back. So
right.
It's just like, oh, it's vibrating more, or it's moving away, or whatever. But
yeah, Lore has somehow figured it out.
You don't get the moment like you do with, the nanites or the life form, the microbiome in home soil, where it's like, here's what I am and why I'm doing this. You don't get anything like that. You just have to kind of guess at its intent and what you can do about it. And unfortunately, the one that we see is destroyed. So
yeah.
Do
we see, is this a single creature? Because we don't see like other crystalline entities. We don't know if it lives in its community or if it has
I mean, is it clear that the one we see in Silicon Avatar is the same one that's in Daedalus?
Oh, good point.
I don't know. But also, again, going back to this novel Orion's Hounds, there is more than one. There's a whole community of them.
Community.
It's not just like a single one, but that's not canon. So later they could say it's the only one. But
right.
I think that would make sense, that there's a whole kind of group of them and there are certain species. Yeah. But it's a very memorable spaceborne species. If you say crystalline entity, I think any Star Trek fan gets the image in their mind and they know what it is.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah. So I am very glad that you put this on. Let's talk about Genesis.
Yes.
Genesis. So all the de-evolved forms of the crew that we get, I just think is so awesome. These definitely are creatures. But again, is this man-made? Or, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, but in this case, I think it's an accident with what Crusher does for Barclay, something that she does with some kind of manipulation to help him out, interacts with this virus, and so they kind of create it. But I put it in this category because, like in Identity Crisis, there's something that's transforming them into something different. So, you get Riker as kind of a Neanderthal or, previous human form. You get Troy like a frog, which is kind of frightening to see.
Yes, the amphibian Troy. Love it. It's cold in here. See, I relate to her. She's turn up the heat.
You feel like an amphibian sometimes?
Yes. That's why I live in Las Vegas. So if ever I get cold, I can just walk outside.
Oh, really? So you walk outside when it's 110 and you're like, this is perfect.
You saw me at Star Trek Las Vegas.
That was
I was like
inside.
freezing in there.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't see you outside in 110-degree heat, and whether you'd want to stand there for a while.
I was out there.
But yeah, that's great. We see the Barclay spider, which is really frightening. Nurse Ogawa turns into some kind of prior human form, ape-like form. And also, so I put in a picture here of the de-evolved Worf, which actually you don't see it this clearly in the episode, but because you just see it and it's kind of like he has this freaky face, but it's in shadow. But this was a picture, I can probably post it in the Babel conference, but this is a picture of the actor that put on those prosthetics. I don't think it was Michael Dorn, but it's this really like kind of gnarly, spiked, rough face with this, I don't know, some kind of tentacles coming out of the chin or something like that. It's really
they sort of look like tusks.
Yeah. I'll have to post that picture because in the episode itself, you don't see it as clearly as this image of the actor in that makeup. But just, I mean, it really frightening forms, and it's Genesis isn't my favorite episode, but it's interesting, and I love seeing like these different forms and these different creatures that they could be. It's like the episode where the Enterprise crew, they are really the monsters that are threatening everyone else on the ship. So that's a pretty cool concept. So I had to put it in here because they do turn into other creatures.
Well, and this episode won an award for its makeup.
Oh, I think the makeup is great for this one. Yeah, it really is.
And the creativity. It always sort of bugged me. I don't know if bug is the right word. That's a little too strong. But I always wondered, I'm like, okay, I get that Troy was different because she's Betazoid, right? I get that Worf is different because he's Klingon. Right. But Riker, Barclay, and Nurse Ogawa, like they're all humans, and yet they're turning into something different. And especially Barclay with the spider, like Nurse Ogawa and Riker, I get it. They're going to different prototype, proto-man and ape. I get that. But like a spider, why would Barclay go to a spider?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot of problems with this de-evolution concept in this episode and other Star Trek episodes. But yeah, a spider would be a problem because you'd have to basically like go back to the common ancestor with, hominids or greater apes and then go up a different branch of the tree to get to spiders. Yeah. And that makes no sense, but it's freaky.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole concept really doesn't make too much sense, but it's fun.
Great for Star Trek, and it's just fun. Exactly.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, Justin, what do you think about these 12 creatures / monsters that we've talked about?
Yeah, as I said, I mean, I'm sure there's more that we could cover. My original list, I think, had 30 or more, but it's interesting to look at it from this perspective and to see the whole variety of different creatures that we get. You get these writhing worms that Klingons eat. You get a Targ, which is kind of like a pet that looks like a boar. You get a parasite that looks like maybe like a beetle or a scorpion. You get the space jellyfish, which really truly is like a jellyfish in space, but it's a cool concept that it's a spaceborne species, lives its life there, but can also live on a planet and mimic other things and has a lot of power and all of that. And you see the different spaceborne species in Galaxy's Child and in Tin Man that are also, quite different. Then you see something like Armus from Skin of Evil that is really like a monster or something that's like pure evil. You get the microbrain life form, which is this tiny thing that can still communicate with you and is just trying to live its life. You have the nanites. You have the Tarkanan 3 species from Identity Crisis that turns people into these other types of creatures that are invisible except in ultraviolet. You have these aliens from another realm from Schisms, the crystalline entity, which is another cool spaceborne species, and even de-evolving the different crew members of the Enterprise. So I think in looking at this, in the Next Generation, there were a lot of different types of creatures that they presented us with. It wasn't like the same thing all the time. And it presented different storytelling opportunities for these different creatures and where you could take it. And, a lot of them are, I think, pretty memorable episodes or memorable things. Like everybody knows about Gok. Everybody's going to remember the parasites from Conspiracy or the space jellyfish or, Armis or the crystalline entity or the nanites. I mean, it's a lot of, or the aliens from Schisms. It's from a lot of the kind of most memorable episodes. And I think over the course of the show, and I did only take things from the show because I was thinking about the movies and I was like, do we really have anything? Maybe not so much. But over the course of the 7 seasons, they were putting together all of these different kinds of life forms and creatures, and it just took you to all of these different storytelling places and all of these different memorable episodes. So I like looking at this and seeing what they did with it, because I think they did a lot of really interesting things with all of these kind of creatures and monsters.
Yeah, I'm with you. Looking at this list and the more that we didn't even cover, like the creativity is off the charts. I so many times am watching Next Gen going, where do they come up with this stuff? And, the makeup and the costuming and the design and just the whole idea of it, just I am so impressed every single time. And you're right, just the wide spectrum of space living, earth bearing creatures and monsters is so crazy. I love it. And I hope that, we can learn from this as a human species and decide how are we going to react when we do come across something that is alien and foreign to us. I mean, we've seen a lot of different ways that it has been handled in fiction. And so how are we going to assume the worst? Are we going to assume they're attacking us? How are we going to treat? Are we going to enslave them? Are we going to endanger them? I think it says a lot, and that we can learn from, this crazy fiction that's not real, but still take away, like, what are we going to do when we do come across something that is foreign and a creature to us,
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, because unless there's some progenitor species like you see in The Chase, if there are other intelligent life forms and other kinds of life out there, in the galaxy, it's probably going to be, I think maybe it would be more likely that you would see something like that would be exotic, like one of these creatures, than to see something that would look like a Vulcan or a Trill or a Klingon or something like that. I think it's quite likely you'll find something very different, because they might have different circumstances, or they don't use DNA, they use a different kind of genetic material or something like that, right? So this and that's also what I love about Star Trek. It gets us thinking about these things, because hopefully eventually we'll make contact with some other life form and it might be very different, and hopefully we've thought about some of these things beforehand.
Right.
Exactly. That's why everybody should watch Star Trek, right? To try to get there, and not be, I'm sure we'll be surprised. Like if it happens tomorrow that we're contacted by some alien civilization or see some spaceborne life form, I'm sure it'll even be something that is much wilder than anything we've even seen in Star Trek, probably.
Yeah.
But at least it's preparing us a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, when it boils down, when you just boil it down, it's how do we deal with differences?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where it's, a different species, a creature, or even, somebody with different ideology living here, my neighbor. How do we deal with those differences? But so, yes, everyone should watch Star Trek. I agree.
For sure. Yep.
So next week, oh my gosh, I can't believe we will be having our favorite character moments from season 7.
Wait, Amy, I think our listeners have heard this preview before.
Well, we had a little bump in the road with Patrick Stewart.
Well, no, I mean it was not even a Patrick Stewart
right.
episode. It was just that Richard was away a bit at the last minute. So we were going to do favorite character moments season 7. Hope you enjoyed Creatures of TNG instead. But next week, if everyone's available, it's our intent to do favorite character moments season 7 finally.
Yeah, scheduling and bumps in the road. That's what happens. But that is our intent.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to it. So many people I hear don't like season 7, and they quote unquote call it the family reunion. Whatever.
That would be Zach Moore again. Zach, I hope you're listening and your ears are burning a lot.
Yes.
But
So we will get to that. So it's been so much fun talking about creatures and monsters on The Next Generation, but that isn't the only thing we've been talking about here on the network. Here is what you might have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, the 602 Club.
I think that while I agree he's not malicious, and I hesitate, it's hard to call him evil because he seems like such a... Zahn does a really great head game of constructing this time on an Imperial ship where you have to continually say to yourself, it's almost like watching John Smith at home in The Man in the High Castle. You see this guy if anybody hasn't watched it, it's an alternative history thing based on a Philip K. Dick novel where in this alternate history, the Axis powers won World War II. And so
coming soon to a 6 Club near you.
Oh, yeah, I love the show so much. But one of the mind tricks that show does with you is you meet this one character where you have to continually remind yourself he's working for the bad guys. Stop giving him so many breaks.
Earl Grey.
But I wanted to actually do some humming and singing of my choice, if that's all right with you guys.
Please take it away.
So what I thought of it was I fell into a burning ring of fire. It went down, 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 and the flames went higher. I just love that song. I had to sing it.
To the journey!
You compared the mind meld to notches on a bedpost. Why can't I compare it to trench coat flashing?
No, I'm saying it's not like that. It shouldn't be like that. You're the one saying it's like that. I'm not at all.
But if you're doing it, that's what you're doing. You're seeing how many people you can mind meld with, and that's notches on a bedpost or trench coat flashing. That's what you're trying to do.
It just seems like such an efficient way to get knowledge and experiences from other people.
You know what's more efficient? Assimilation.
Yes, it is.
So what's stopping you from going that next step?
Because we're talking about the Kess era here. We don't have 7 of 9 yet,
Continuing mission.
So you were in the second episode.
I was in the second episode, which...
And at that time, it was no longer Star Trek Renegades, it was just Renegades?
Well, when I got on the plane to go down to be on set, it was Star Trek Renegades. When the plane landed, CBS had released fan film guidelines.
Okay.
And so they had already shot one day as Star Trek Renegades with Nichelle Nichols and Walter Koenig, Cirque Lofton and Tim Russ doing some green screen work, and they had the uniforms, the ears, the badges, all that. Mm-hmm. And then they had to shut production down for a day. They tried to get a hold of lawyers, talking to lawyers, saying, what do we do to continue or not continue?
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. That helps others to find the show.
If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our show on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab that RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up.
If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show, and select Earl Grey. That will come right to us, and we might read your email on the show. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. So, Justin, where can people contact you when you're not eating gach?
You mean when I'm not eating the vegetarian gach that has the motors inside to keep it squirming around? No. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at TrekFan4747, where I tweet about nothing but Star Trek. Currently tweeting out my Season 6 rewatch of The Next Generation. And you can also find me hanging around the Babel Conference on Facebook. So, Amy, where can people contact you when you're not getting impressions from space jellyfish?
Great joy and gratitude.
Wait, that's supposed to happen at the end of the show.
Oh, yeah. So sorry. I was getting the impression a little bit early. Well, you can find me here on the network. I co-host The Edge with Patrick Devlin, and that is our Star Trek Discovery podcast on Trek FM. I also am on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, and I am tweeting about my Deep Space Nine rewatch/watch. And I'm in season 4 now. Yay.
All right. How far in season 4 are you as of this recording?
Episode 10.
Okay.
And so it was a 2-parter. Oh, I forget the name of it. I just tweeted it out. But, it's where the Dominion, and they're down on a Starfleet headquarters, and they're trying to...
Homefront Paradise Lost?
Yes, Homefront. Yeah.
Okay.
And my favorite place is on the Babel Conference, because that's where all the fun is at. So,
if you'd like to help us keep all our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more, available through our special patrons website, The Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
And we have 4 creatures and monsters that we want to appreciate right now. They are our current associate producers, Norman Lau, Justin Ozer, Michael Huter, and Thomas Appel. Thank you for supporting Trek FM, and especially Earl Grey. So join us next time for another cup of Earl Grey.
Glory to you and your Gach.
Great joy and gratitude.